really help me much, but I
on
feel like
the
we've done so
10th
many.
one, you get a few extra hours of sleep, Simon.
Maybe.
Weekend off.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get underway then. I'm sure more people will join us as we go, but hello everyone. Welcome to the open house on the Clifton Scott town developments. I'm Jeff Leeper. I'm the city councillor for the neighborhood. We've heard in some previous open houses that things are taking a little bit too long at the top before we get into Q&A, so we're going to try to keep it a little bit tighter tonight. I will just say from the outset, this looks like the kind of development that should receive relatively easy support from city council. It's not another 12-story tower or something in behind the really tall one on Scott, but I am very interested in getting your feedback, and we'll talk about more at the end. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Fiona Mitchell, who works with me on planning files in the office, to talk about how the evening can unfold.
Thank you, Jeff. So hello, everyone. So the way we're going to move forward tonight is very shortly, we're going to turn it over to the applicant, and they're going to run through a brief high-level presentation of the proposed application. For those who may not know, this actually just went on DevApps like yesterday, I think. So I'll send, myself or Simon will send the DevApp link into chat. So if you want to review some of those details at a finer level, you can check those out on DevApps. After the high-level presentation, we'll move into a Q&A. So if you move your cursor to the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A button, and you can type a question into there. I will then read them out loud, and you'll see them show up on your screen. So here's an example. This is a test question. You should see that pop up. One of the panelists will answer, and then we'll click done and move on to the next one. Someone's already added something. Brett appears to have a halo. Yeah, I have some light going on too, so thanks for that. Feel free to post your questions throughout the presentation. You don't have to wait till we move forward into the Q&A because they can just stay there. It's fine. And we'll go for as long as the questions go for. I'm going to avoid as much as possible repeated questions. So it's possible that you may ask the same question as somebody else. I'll just read, you know, if there's a particular question about traffic, I'll just read that one time. And skip the next one. And also, if you ask 3 or 4 questions in a row, I might grab 1 or 2 and then go on to somebody else just to make sure everyone has the opportunity to ask some questions. If you feel as though we haven't answered your question here tonight, we strongly encourage you to email us your question afterwards. As well, since this is on DevApps, after this session, if you do want to submit official feedback, you're going to want to do that to Simon, who is the lead planner. Simon, I don't know if you want to wave or say hello right now.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I will be in the background listening and taking notes.
Perfect. Thanks, Simon. And anything you send Simon, we also like to be included on, just so that we're looped into the feedback that you're submitting as well. Don't feel, you can submit comments during this presentation as well. I can read a few of them out, but don't feel like this is your only opportunity for feedback, because like I said, the official feedback route is sending us that email. So with that, oh, also, sorry, this is going to be recorded and it's going to go on YouTube. So in a few days from now, this will be on YouTube, and you can send that out to any neighbors who may have missed this session. So with that, I am turning it over to James, the applicant, who's going to introduce the team and then move into a presentation. James, are you there? We may. James,
Link seems to be frozen.
Am I frozen?
No, you're back now.
I'm back. Sorry, my internet is really having a tough time. So I think, Barrett, you may have to cover for me if I'm freeze for too long. So yeah, I'm James McMillan, representing the applicant and the ownership group of the project. And with me on the team from Stantec, we have Barrett. Nancy Maloche may join at some point as well. From architecture, from Barry Hogan's office, we have Hugo Luttrell and possibly Bill Ritzy joining. And our engineering and civil support comes from Seema Plust, and we have Tim Kennedy with us there. So that's the team that hopefully will be able to answer any and all questions that you guys have coming our way.
Let me know if you're having troubles with sharing your screen, James, and I can.
Oh, there. I think it went live now. I think I'm good to share.
Okay.
So I will get that up. Screens. So I think everybody should be able to see that now. And so just as a very quick overview, and then I'll pass it on to the experts, is we have the subject site starts at the corner of, the south starts at the corner of Wilbur and Clifton. And it's the 5 lots moving north towards Scott Street. And you know, the neighbors in back are the Pythian and Farm Boy building there, and then we have the neighbor to the north is an application that went in a few years ago, and so that's the overall site context. And in terms of the proposal, we've proposed 29 freehold townhouses. 17 traditional townhouses would be the ones facing Wilbur and Clifton, and then in behind there are 12 back-to-back townhouses. And it's rezoning from R3R to an R3 exemption zoning, and that is primarily to remove the townhome exemption that is on the R3R zoning, and to allow for the specifics of the site, such as setbacks and things like that. And in terms of the context, which of course Hugo will go into much more detail on, is we've tried to present a proposal that fits in terms of the context of the surrounding scale and also design elements that pick up on the Westboro area and are appropriate for this sort of intensification. And then in terms of very high level target timelines, it would be sometime in spring, early summer 2021 that we would look to have construction started, and that should last 18 to 24 months. So that would be the sort of total timeline. And that's really all from my end. So I believe I'll hand it over to Hugo, who will get into more details on it.
Perfect. Thanks, James. So, like James mentioned, my name is Hugo Latre. I'm with Hoban Architecture. I'm working on this project with Barry Hoban and Bill Ritzy, who will be joining us shortly, and he'll be available for the Q&A. As far as the actual project goes, first of all, we have to take a look at the neighborhood context, which, as you all know, as residents, is a really architecturally diverse neighborhood. So we have a lot of different typologies. We have a lot of single-family homes, and many of them are heritage homes or more traditional homes. We have a lot of semi-detached homes that are have been popping up the past couple of years. And again, these are starting to be a bit more modern in design, and clearly more recently high-rise condos that are going around the entire neighborhood. As you can see, just our site, just north of our site and west, is all towers, applications for a higher tower. So generally these stuff is pretty street oriented, pedestrian friendly, and family oriented, and that's kind of something we'd like to preserve in our design. So we can go to the next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is kind of the aerial site plan. You see Clifton Road to the right here, and then Wilbur down at the bottom. We tried to develop a strategy that was that would fit in well with the neighborhood. So stuff like traffic control. Essentially, you have an entrance and an exit off Clifton Avenue, so there'd be no extra traffic on Wilbur. This is it makes it so it's better control for entrance and exit. And on the inner streets, we have all the garages. So there will be no garages off Clifton Road or Wilbur Avenue. All the garages will be facing this inner lane. So that will alleviate definitely just a lot of in and out from the site. Where you see the C along Clifton Road and Wilbur Avenue, those are what James called more traditional townhomes. So those are through and through. They have the front entrance off the street, off a large front patio, and then the garages at the lower level at the rear, and they have some windows facing the inner lane. So that is the same typology along Clifton Road and Wilbur Avenue. On the inner lane here, what I'm calling D are the back-to-back homes. So those are back-to-back towns, so they actually have frontage just on one side. There will be two garages at the front off the inner lane, and then entrances off the side of the building. So there's 4 per block. And Jeff or Fiona, just a little aside, I got a message from Bill here that he's waiting for access, if someone could let him in. Yeah, so I think that kind of covers the general planning of the site. So we can move on to the next slide here. You'll get a bit more of a technical view of what that looks like. So like I mentioned here, off Clifton Road, you have the kind of inner lane going in and out, and blocks 3, 4, and 5 are the back-to-backs. Those have the 2 garages off the front with side entrances, and the traditional towns have the garages also off the back. There are some areas for temporary snow storage, but generally the idea is that would kind of be put at the end of the lanes and then picked up by a contractor. So what you see at Clifton and Wilbur Avenue are purely front entrances, landscaping, and patios. So we can move on to the next slide. Like I mentioned, so the housing typology we find was a really nice scale for the neighborhood. To us, it's kind of the missing piece there. Like I said, there's a lot of higher towers and then a lot of lower scale kind of single family homes. And our typology of the 3-story townhouse kind of acts as a buffer in between those 2 typologies, which we think would actually benefit the neighborhood. The other benefit to this is that there's a lot of front landscaping, so that hasn't been fully developed, but the idea is that it would be kind of these stone retaining walls that lead up to the front door that would be heavily landscaped, and the front door are slightly elevated off the street. So again, we're going back to, this is kind of a good urban environment. It's a pedestrian friendly environment, and it's a family friendly environment. It's made to have kind of a walkable aspect off the street. So we can go to the next slide. Our office has done a lot of work in Westboro, and these are kind of some precedents that are similar to the housing typologies that we would be that we're considering here. So project is on Ravenhill Common. It's a similar 3-story town, similar kind of material and design. So if you've seen those, this should give you an idea of what kind of to imagine. Of course, it's going to be different. Every one of our designs, we really try to work on to be kind of unique and individual, but we do draw some inspiration on some other projects. So Ravenhill Common would be one. We can go to the next slide here. And then again, another that's a little bit older would be St. George's Yard, which again is a 3-story townhouse. It's not very high density, but a little bit higher density than single family homes. And we find that it brings in an interesting typology that seems to be missing in the city, especially with a need to densify a little bit without going really high. So as far as the design itself, if we go to the next slide, we the design context for this, so what inspired us in actually the materiality and the exterior design of the buildings, once we had the mass figured out, was we drew a lot of inspiration from historical elements. So we're looking at a photo of Richmond Road here. So it was important to us to use stuff like traditional brick, which was used often on main streets. And then we used a few kind of design cues from the Canada Central Railway and the Canadian Pacific Railway that used to run through Westboro, where Westboro Station was. So and then another inspiration, which would be kind of Skeed Mills. It's just a modern interpretation of an industrial building. So we use kind of large windows with mullions that have that allude to the industrial architecture a little bit. But again, we're trying to celebrate the contrast in the neighborhood between kind of the traditional and the contemporary. So it's kind of a marriage between the two styles of architecture. So we can move on to the next slide. Again, these are just speaking to the materiality that we're going to use. So along Clifton Road and Wilbur Avenue, we use a lot more kind of heritage brick. So this is a red brick. And then in order for the different blocks to appear a little bit differently, we're going to have different color variations of different bricks. But this is one block on Wilbur that would have the red brick. And then in some of the images, you'll see that we will use a different brick or a different material that's just to give a little bit of variety along the block so they don't get too repetitive. But again, since it's such a small scale project, we only have kind of 2 blocks in a row. Like I mentioned previously, along Clifton Avenue and Wilbur, we have these kind of stone landscape retaining walls, and this is going back to being reminiscent of, you can actually go to the next slide, sorry Jim, I forgot to mention. So the materials are tactile on the street, they're authentic, these are kind of real materials, they're not cheap, they'll have a really nice feel to them. And again, this is going to be a heavily landscaped area. We can go to the next slide here. On some of the inner blocks, some of the more kind of contemporary materials we're going to use is the standing seam metal, and that we have, as you'll see from the rendering, some of the inner blocks, the back-to-back townhomes will be a bit more clad in metal. So the inner block is a little bit more contemporary, and then the outer kind of ring along Wilbur and Clifton will be a little bit more traditional and industrial in nature. We can go to the next slide. Another one of our projects in the area, this is 1140 Wellington. And again, this just speaks to the kind of large windows to bring in a lot of natural light. We want these, these townhomes to be very pleasant, and the spaces to be well lit. And so we're going to use large windows and similar kind of patterning on the windows there that's a little bit more industrial. Black window frames that, again, continues the theme. So now we can move on to the actual design. You've seen the site plan in the previous slide, but this is just to kind of reiterate. Now that we've talked about the architecture a little bit, you can see along the bottom, along Wilbur, those are the red brick townhomes, and then the central block is a slightly different brick color, but again, the same architecture. And then the final block, that's a little bit further to the north, and you can see some of the inner blocks are a little bit more metal and wood clad. We can go to the next slide. So this is the furthest block to the north along the drive aisle. Again, kind of a setback at the 3rd story so that the massing appears to be kind of more of a 2-story townhome, which feels a little bit more comfortable at street level for pedestrians. And, we used a darker material there to kind of help that 3rd story disappear a little bit. We can go to the next slide here. Just another view. So these are the towns along Clifton. This is kind of looking north at the proposed towers here. We can go to the next slide. Now we have the corner of Clifton Road and Wilbur Avenue. Along the corner, we'll have kind of a special unit that's more facing on Clifton, so there will be no kind of bare brick walls along that corner there. We can move on. That's the inner site here. So as I was mentioning, they're a little bit more metal clad. And again, we're very early in the process. So these have been kind of designed, but the design will continue to evolve a little bit. But we think this is a really good first step in what we're trying to achieve as far as the design goes. So similar strategy here. We kind of try to create a 2-story mass, and then the 3rd story is set back a little bit, which makes it feel a little bit more comfortable. It opens up the inner lane a little bit, and yeah, so that's kind of where we are with the architecture. And again, the further slides are just units. I've included those just for your information. Of the unit type 1 is going to be the back-to-back, and along the so we can go to the next slide, James. So that's the type 1 along Clifton. These are about 1,500 square feet. 1,600 square feet, and if we go to the next one, the back-to-back towns will be a little bit smaller, so again a little bit more affordable. So we try to vary the product that will be on the site there. And that's it for the design. I'm sure there'll be some questions which we'll answer in the Q&A, and then I'll hand over the presentation to Barrett, who's going to talk about some of the zoning stuff.
Perfect. Thank you, Hugo. Just looking at time here, so I'll try to make this as quick as possible so we can try to get everyone's questions in. So my name is Barrett Wager. I'm the planning consultant from Stantec Consulting, working on behalf of the applicant. And I'm going to go over a brief overview of the policy and the regulations that apply from a planning perspective. First off, we have the provincial policy statement. And this is just a high-level provincial-wide planning document which helps to provide objectives of how municipalities should grow over the long term. And whenever we consider residential development, which is being proposed in this situation, one of the main goals is to achieve a strong and healthy community. And as part of that goal, you know, the province wants to encourage that there's be efficient development patterns, providing compact built form, that there be a variety in housing types and tenures, and that development be transit supportive, so to make sure those densities match up with areas which are in proximity to transit. And when we look at our development, we made sure that we were consistent with these policies by providing compact design that achieves an efficient use of space and infrastructure, provide an appropriate transition of use from the interior of Clifton to the edge of Clifton towards Scott Street. And then, of course, providing transit supportive density given the proximity to the Westboro station. Next slide, James. So starting at that higher level with the provincial policy, we then get down into municipal policy. And we jump into the city's official plan, which is, again, similar to the PPS. It's a long-term guiding document intended to help achieve the vision of the city's growth and development over the long term. As part of this plan, the city is broken up into different types of designations, different land use designations. And one of the most common ones, if not the most common in the urban area, is the general urban area designation. And this is the designation which applies to the subject site. The purpose for this designation is basically to provide a wide range of housing types and densities to allow neighborhoods to mature and evolve through intensification and infill, to provide intensification primarily in the form of low-rise multi-unit housing, and to support intensification that is compatible with and complementary to existing development. The definition for compatible development noted in the official plan essentially states that it is development that is not necessarily the same as or similar to existing buildings in the vicinity, but can enhance an established community through good design and innovation, and coexist with existing development without causing undue adverse impact on surrounding properties. So again, very similar to the application of the provincial policies, our proposal conforms to the policies of the official plan by providing that ground-oriented multi-unit development, by enhancing the public realm along Clifton, providing compatible development through appropriate building form, material, the site layout, and of course, achieving that transit supportive density that we're proposing. Next slide, James. So after the official plan, we get into more finite detail with basically the similar policies as the official plan, but policies which are more context specific to certain areas throughout the city. These types of plans, which are called subsidiary plans, come in the form of secondary plans and community design plans. And within this specific area of the city, we have the Richmond Road and Westboro secondary plan and community design plan. And these plans basically break up the study area into a number of different planning area sectors. These planning area sectors are, each unique in their own right. And so the policies are designed to reflect that, to allow them to grow, achieve certain densities, heights, land uses in the way that they should. And the subject site actually falls outside of any of these planning sector areas. So it's not quite given that same level of detail of how it should be developed, but there are general policies and direction within those plans which do speak to the way that development should take form. And it's generally as low-rise residential development, which supports compatibility and is complementary to surrounding land uses. So again, like mentioned with the parent official plan and the provincial policies, we do comply with the policies of these plans by providing that low-rise building heights and that scale transition from the interior of the neighborhood to the more higher density, high-rise development to the north and to the west. We provide that variation in the street wall, which adds visual interest, building design that breaks up mass and allows the streetscape to be the emphasis of the site, removing the driveways and the different private approaches which previously existed, replacing them with increased landscaping and active frontages, to have an overall effect of improving and enhancing the pedestrian environment. Next slide. So this is when we get into more of the nitty-gritty details of how sites throughout the city are basically regulated to develop. And this has to do with the zoning bylaw. So the subject site as it exists today is zoned R3R, which stands for Residential Third Density Zone, Subzone R. And the purpose of this zone is basically to allow for a mix of residential building forms and land use types. And it's to regulate development of these land uses in a way that ensures compatibility with the existing land use patterns. So if you look at the image at the bottom left on the slide, you'll see it's an overview of the zoning of the site and the surrounding area. The subject site's shown in that white hatching. And you'll see there's that little red text showing the R3R, and it's encompassed by that darkened red perimeter line. So essentially what we plan to do for this proposal is to amend the zoning to permit certain land uses and certain proposal specific performance standards to allow us to move forward with the proposal. And those specific land uses are townhouse dwelling, stack dwelling, and a planned unit development. And then the proposal specific performance standards, those relate to certain setbacks, projections, building height, matters like that. And the form in which we're doing it is through an urban exception. So essentially what we'll be doing is we'll be retaining the parent zoning of the site. So we're not changing it to an R4, to an R5, or to a general mixed use or anything like that. It's staying within an R3 zone. However, we're providing a site-specific exception which allows us just on that site to provide those requested land uses and performance standards. So, and just another note to make is that the R3, the highest density you can achieve in that zone as of right is basically the type of land uses which we're proposing. So it doesn't permit low-rise apartment, it doesn't permit mid-rise or high-rise apartment. So you won't expect to see, our proposal going through and then coming back with, plans for a 4, 5, 6, 7-story apartment tower. That's not the case with this rezoning and the way we framed it. It's very specific to the proposed development, being townhouses, and that's really all it is. You'll see at the bottom right of this slide, we have a table which kind of breaks down exactly the format of how that rezoning is to take shape. It notes the additional land uses to be added, as well as the provisions or the performance standards to be adjusted. All of these details, including that snippet, can be found online on the city's Dev app website, and you can find that in the planning rationale report. So if we go to the next and last slide. So just as a quick summary of the planning, we're demonstrating through this proposal that we're consistent with the provincial policy statement. We conform to the city's official plan policies and its subsidiary policies and plans. Generally, we comply with the zoning bylaw and the purpose and intent for the R3 zone, but we do require relief, zoning relief, to permit those specific low-rise residential land uses and certain proposal-specific performance standards. So in order to do that, we have submitted our zoning bylaw amendment application. It went in on September 24th, and the city has reviewed it. They have deemed it complete as of October 6th. So they will now send it out for technical circulation and review. As of now, we're looking at January, maybe February for our planning committee date, depending on how the review period goes. You'll see there's a list on the right side of this slide, which identifies the different supporting technical studies and plans which were submitted along with the zoning bylaw amendment. So I'm sure with many of the questions which might come in, the answers are found within some of those different technical studies and plans, but of course we're going to help bring those out and get you responses to your questions. And lastly, a bit of the process, once the zoning is at a stage, or the application is at a stage where we feel comfortable, the city feels comfortable, and the councillor feels comfortable with the direction of it, then the intent is to submit a site plan control application. And this is another Planning Act application which is required before you get to the point of your permitting and your construction. And that's basically just a process where we make sure the design of the proposal is really detailed to the point where permits can be released and the construction can move forward. So that wraps up everything for the planning, and I think for our presentation and all, so I think we're good to head off to Q&A now.
Okay, thank you. First, we're missing one of the architects, Bill. Apparently you're in the meeting, but I don't see the name Bill. So can you send a Q&A with whichever name you're signed in under, so that I can promote you to a panelist? Because I don't want to promote the wrong person, and unfortunately I don't see a Bill listed. So as we're waiting for that to come through, I will start to go through the questions. Some questions were answered earlier with some type, but I'm going to go back to those and read the responses, just so that everyone's aware in case you missed them during the presentation. So one of the first questions, the proposed development increases the area covered with asphalt/structure at the expense of green space. Has there been any consideration to the impact on rainwater drainage/runoff? And Simon, the planner with the city, responded, a servicing report has been prepared in support, which does look at stormwater management. This will also be reviewed at a more detailed level through the site plan control process. I have provided the link, and the link is in the chat. Did anyone else want to comment on that before I move away from it?
Yeah, just to add to that, that storage will be provided on site for stormwater management to control it to pre-development levels, so there won't be an increase in runoff for the site for sure.
Okay, thank you. Next one, based on the info on the dev apps, this is a condo project. Given a complete lack of green space associated with the development, what is your target market for new owner/neighbors? And James responded, the proposal is to have the townhouses be freehold ownership with only the common element, brackets, driveway and common walkways, on end of bracket, governed by a condo corporation. We expect this product to be attractive to a variety of buyers, from young couples moving from suburban townhomes to current Westboro residents looking to downsize. Did anyone else want to comment on that before I move on? Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna see if Bill has messaged us. Bill has not messaged us, so.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, so you're on the panel, you're good?
I am, I think so.
Okay, perfect.
He's the third Hugo that's on here.
No problem. Okay.
Hugo covers a lot of territory. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Okay, so the next question. Given the national construction duration and the fact that Clifton Road, is already moderately heavily traveled, how do you propose to manage construction so as to not make usage of our street impractical? For example, parking for trades, deliveries of materials, etc.
Hi, Fiona. I can take an attempt at that. As part of the site plan control process, and a particular interest to this ward and this councillor, is construction management. It's something that every project in an urban area has to resolve and start to assess. We don't have the details of that now. I certainly recognize it's a tight site, but that is something that will have to be prepared later as far as a traffic management plan and construction staging. There will be impacts to the road and use of it, but through that process and the councilor's input, we'll be trying to mitigate that. But as James set out, there's a construction period, there is a period of inconvenience, but the issue on a whole will be certainly on the radar of myself and the ward office.
Fiona, are we will normally do our pre-construction meeting. I don't know if you talked to the applicants about that as a site plan condition, but.
I think we maybe have mentioned it in one of our early meetings, but with every application of this scale that comes forward for Kitchissippi Ward, we do make a site plan condition for a pre-construction meeting with immediate residents who are going to be impacted. So once they are ready to get those shovels in the ground, we'll go over where the truck traffic is going to go, the high level details and milestones that they'll be hitting, removal of materials and any impact to adjacent property owners. And we'll also disseminate contact information. So if there's like a site project manager, if they feel comfortable passing along their contact information to maybe a representative of some of the residents, or if residents want to go through our office, then we connect with the PM. We'll discuss a communication strategy so that if there is an issue on site, you folks know exactly who to contact so that it's dealt with in a timely manner. And we'll make that a site plan condition so it keeps them, they have to do it. Okay, next question. Will there be enough room for parking and driveways?
So to answer that, generally the parking will take place in the garages. We understand that some people have, use their garage for storage, but this is a tight urban site. We really didn't have room to supply a full kind of visitor parking in front of every garage because of just the nature of the site. I believe there are a couple of the rear lanes that will have some room for a car, but generally it's not. We're not required to have any visitor parking, or and we're not providing it, unfortunately.
One of the concerns I want to make sure I understand the question as well. Those driveway spots that people have, will they be big enough to accommodate a vehicle?
There are a few, just how the rear property line is kind of at an angle. So some of them are, some of the houses are a bit further from the inner lane, which gives kind of the intermediate space, enough room for possibly a vehicle. But generally the garages are pretty tight to the inner lane, so there won't be any room for a secondary vehicle.
Okay, so one of my frustrations in the ward overall is people are being told either by the developer who is selling or renting, or by real estate agents who are selling these units, that there's lots of parking available on the street, and there isn't. And we're starting to field more and more complaints from people who've been told that there's parking, and then they're getting tickets. So it's going to be really important for you folks to let buyers know that there is no street parking. If they use their garage for all their stuff, they're not going to be able to find parking on the street.
That's right. I think that's probably something people can agree upon. They know when buying in or we would hope that they know when buying in an urban neighborhood like this, that their garages is for their car.
We find it's the real estate agents. We did
try to provide enough storage throughout the houses, and especially they're mostly 3-bedroom units. So in the event that a third bedroom is kind of used as a storage, if it's not in use, then we did try to provide storage so that the garage could be used as for a vehicle.
Great. Thanks.
And on that note, Heather is asking, Heather, who's with the Westboro Community Association, the vice president, I believe, where will the visitors park? So I think the residents of the community, always concerned about impacts to those residential side streets. Did anyone want to speak more to that before I move on?
Sure. I would just add, I think there's been quite a bit of underground parking added to, on McRae, and then I believe in the 2 buildings that are heading up on Scott Street. And in my experience, certainly in the McRae buildings, there's quite a bit of parking capacity there. So the hopes would be that any visitors would have that as a resource to lean on, which is just around the corner.
I also don't want it to be missed, of course, but we are just over 200 meters from the transit station. So, of course, we'd like to rely on that as much as possible. And part of the reality is that the closer you are, the hope is that you can provide less parking. It's part of the city's policies, and it's what we'd like to achieve as well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your thoughtful design. I like it, especially the care you have taken with the streetscape on Clifton. We look directly at the new proposal. The massing is a nice bridge between what we have and what we are currently looking at on McRae. Question: Clifton is an emergency route. Just wondering if there's any concern with emergency vehicles coming down the street with 29 new units and associated cars using the street. And then they later said, my question about emergency vehicles would also apply for the construction period.
Again,
I was going to say it's probably best to have Simon answer it, but
okay.
Essentially emergency services would be circulated on the application and have opportunity to provide comment, any concerns. Simon, if you want to add to that.
No, absolutely. You're right, Barrett. We'll look at that through site plan control as well. If the internal road is required to be an emergency route, if a large vehicle, a fire truck or ambulance has to get in, then it would be designed accordingly. But based on experience, I don't think that's going to be an issue. No different than any other active construction site.
Yeah, just to reiterate, I think the site depth isn't deep enough for the inner road to be required to be a full fire road, meaning that from off Clifton or Wilbur, the fire department considers the kind of lot depth narrow enough to reach the back-to-backs from those 2 main streets.
I agree, and we'll obviously confirm that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to make sure, I think maybe the question was more about Clifton itself and not so much the internal roadway. So rest assured, I believe in Simon, jump in, but there will be opportunity for emergency services to comment on that if Clifton is used as that type of route.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate your taking the time to explain the zoning rationale and potential impacts. Well done. Okay, sorry. Between now and spring 2021, what are the plans in keeping the current vacant properties reasonably maintained? The current situation is neglect.
Yeah, I'll jump in. We had an issue specifically with one tenant, and then it's been a little bit difficult to find tenants in this current environment. But working to make sure the properties are, hopefully we'll able to get some residents in there over the next 6 or 8 months. But at least to improve the street view and all of that along Clifton, we'll work to improve that for sure.
Okay, thank you. There's actually no more questions. Paul followed up to a previous comment earlier. I'll just read it. That's a nice statement, but development, at least here, as discussed over and over. If you want to go up, don't worry about the plan. Have at it. Fair enough.
I'm going to suggest there was some sarcasm there.
Yeah. I'm reading it literally. I'm not adding the.
I know. I appreciate that, Fiona. It's I am actually pleased that this developer is not seeking a 6-story building. I think there was, we all sort of foresaw the potential for something significantly more grasping in terms of height, and I am pleased that this is being proposed at a low rise. It's honestly kind of a surprise to me.
There's no more questions in the Q&A, so I'll give folks a few more seconds if they want to input something. We are well ahead of time, so happy to keep answering questions, but if there are no more questions, we will move towards wrap up. So Jeff, maybe you want to start some concluding remarks? Oh. Judy just says, Judy Lincoln with the Westboro Village BIA has added another well-presented session. Thanks, Judy, for participating in all of these. We appreciate that.
Yeah, so I can take like a good hour and a half to wrap up then.
Sure. Counselor, if I could be so kind, if I could indulge you to just jump in and steal some of your thunder just before you wrap up. I think Barrett did touch on the process. So I guess, like you mentioned, and Fiona mentioned, there's a live site for the support materials, and I've sent the link. And we encourage people, once they see the formal circulation, to send electronic comments to myself and CC the ward office, so you'll be aware of all the comments that are coming in. And as the project evolves, if there's significant redesign or updated materials, we try to post them back online, and we keep this live group informed who have shown interest in the project. So next step is the circulation, and you'll see signs posted on the site as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. And my job in this, and the reason that I asked to be copied on stuff is I don't work for the city and I don't work for the developer. I'm here to advocate for the residents to the degree that I can. And I'm most interested, as I said at the outset, I think council is going to be relatively happy to approve the basics of this, which is a planned unit development, a townhome development. But where you feel strongly about design changes, and sorry, I should say that I too am feeling very sympathetic toward a planned unit development here. I think it's the right transition from the low-rise housing as we get closer and closer to Richmond and beyond, and the very tall buildings that are on Scott. But if there are design considerations that residents have, my job is to advocate with the developers to make those changes and to advocate with the city to insist on those changes. So I'm interested in hearing maybe at a more of a nitty-gritty detail level than I am on many of these where I'm simply outright opposing them. This time I'm going to be quicker to get into some of the setback information and that sort of stuff. So I'll leave it there. And with that, I will just say thank you very much to the development team on this one. Nice, concise presentation. And as always, thank you very much to the residents who came out to see the presentation. And thank you very much, Fiona, for your expert facilitation as always. So with that, I will, Judy, I just saw your question. we'll connect, and I absolutely hear the concern you have. I can be strong on that. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening. Bye now.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Thanks, everyone.